having ready-made meals on your shelf in jars is something that is so important on those busy nights, that you can still have home-cooked meals, something that's healthy to nourish your body, but it's so convenient and it's right on your shelf. Come on, I'm going to show you one of our favorite recipes today to have on our shelf, ready for whenever we need. Hey guys, it's Stephanie with the Rancher's Homestead. Welcome back. So today we're going to do a canning video. I just harvested my potatoes a couple weeks ago and I have loads of potatoes. And one thing I like to do when I start harvesting things is make some ready-made meals out of it. And what I mean by that is getting some meals in a jar that sit on your shelf so that on busy nights or busy days for lunch, whatever you need it for, you can just pull them off, dump them in a pot, heat them up, and they're ready to go. And you still have a healthy, nutritious meal to feed your family that you may be harvesting in the summertime. And so I love doing that. And so today I'm going to use some of my potatoes and can a loaded baked potato soup. This is so good. My kids love it. We will eat it as lunches, and sometimes we will with a grilled cheese, or sometimes we'll just throw it in a pot for dinner with some fresh bread, and it's very satisfying and so good, and it takes no time on a busy night, just the time up front. So the first thing you're going to start with is 12 ounces of bacon, and all you're going to do is just take some bacon. This is our own home-raised bacon, but you can use any bacon you like. And I'm just taking some kitchen scissors here, and I'm going to just cut them up into a stock pot, and you're going to want to cook this all the way through first. And so I will just take the 12 ounces, cut them into little pieces, and get those cooking. Okay, while my bacon is cooking, I have lots of potatoes back here, and I'm going to go ahead and get those washed, peeled, and chopped up. What you're looking for is 16 cups of potatoes. You can use any variety. I wouldn't recommend red potatoes, but you can peel golden potatoes, you can do russet potatoes. These are straight from my garden, so I'm going to see if I can get 16 cups out of this. If not, I have some from the store that I will add to it. Okay, so the bacon is just now cooked all the way through, and I'm going to go ahead and remove it from my pot and put it here in this bowl. The smaller the pieces, the less work it is later on. So you want just small little chunks to go into your soup, and so they cook faster if you can cut them up small, and then you don't have to tear them up any smaller once you get them out of your pot. Okay, all the bacon's out, and I'm going to go ahead and set that over here for a few minutes. Now, in here I have 1 whole onion diced up. I have 6 cloves of garlic minced. I have a half a cup of celery diced up, and a cup of red bell peppers sliced, or diced up. I'm going to go ahead and pour all of that right into my pot. And I'm going to give it a stir, and then I'm going to go ahead and let this cook for just a minute or two. Okay, so I have already added 8 cups of potatoes, and I'm going to add the remaining 8 to make 16 cups of diced potatoes. Now I'm going to add in 9 cups of chicken bone broth. You can use just regular broth from the store, but I highly recommend your own home canned chicken bone broth if you have it. If you're unsure of how to make it and how to can it so that you have it for your shelf, I do have a video out on that, and I'll go ahead and link that in the description. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give it a good stir and then add some spices to it. Okay, so the recipe calls for chives, and it calls for a tablespoon of chives. I don't have any chives on hand, but I do have some freeze-dried chives. So I'm going to go ahead and do a tablespoon of that in there just for the flavor of it. And then I'm going to add in a teaspoon of salt. And this is a good quality salt. I have a Redmond sea salt here. And a teaspoon of paprika. I have a half a teaspoon of pepper. A fourth a teaspoon of cayenne. So you do get a little bit of spice here. Not much. And then an eighth of a teaspoon of sage. Now I'm going to go ahead and give this whole thing a stir. Bring my stovetop up a little bit and let this come to a simmer. I forgot to add the bacon back in. So go ahead and take your bacon that you had already cooked and add that back into your soup as well. And then go ahead and bring that heat up, and you're going to let this go to a simmer, boil a little bit, and for about 15 minutes. You want your potatoes to start getting soft. Then we will add in our water and thickening gel. While you are waiting for your soup to come up to a boil and to boil for 15 minutes, this is a great time to get your jars and lids out, get them washed in warm soapy water, and get them into your canner to keep them warm. So I have my pressure canner going right now, and it's just on low. I've just had it going the entire time to keep the water nice and warm. I'll crank it up here as soon as I get my jars in. Okay, so in here I have 1 cup of cool water with a 1/4 cup of corned beef stick gel or clear gel, if that's what you have. It's going to act the same as cornstarch, but it's canning approved and safe. So I'm going to go ahead and add that now into my soup, and this is going to be what gives you that really nice, good, thick potato soup. You can omit this part if you don't want the thickness. We like it really creamy and thick. So I'm going to go ahead and stir this around and let it cook for about 5 more minutes just to start thickening up. Now, it's not super important that your potatoes are nice and soft at this point because they will continue to cook and finish cooking when they're in the canner, because they're going to be in the canner for a while. Okay, we are ready to fill our jars. So I have the canner up a bit so that it is getting to a simmer in the water. I pulled out all of my hot jars. This recipe makes 5 quart jars or 10 pint jars. We like to do it in quarts because that's what feeds our family well. But you're welcome to do it in smaller sizes so that it's more like the size of a can of soup from the store. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and fill all of our jars, and we're going to do it with a 1-inch headspace. This is rather chunky, and so you want to get the chunks, kind of fill your jars up with chunks and not a lot of liquid at first, and then you can add the liquid towards the end. That helps you to get the right headspace. All my jars are filled, and I'm going to go ahead and take this little handy tool here. You can use the back of a wooden spoon and just stick it down each jar a couple times. This is just to get out any air bubbles or air pockets, and then you can really determine if your headspace is accurate. These kinds of recipes are really, all recipes are important to make sure you have the appropriate headspace, but these kinds are really important because there's a lot of goodness wrapped in this. And if the headspace is not right, then you'll get some seepage out of the top, and then your jar may not seal properly. Now, I've shared this plenty of times before, but if your jar does not seal, that does not mean that your food is bad. That just means you need to put it in your fridge and eat it within a week or two. That it's just not shelf stable. But you don't want to go through all this work to make a shelf stable product and then it not happen. So just always make sure that your headspace is correct. There's nothing on your rims when you cap them, and you should be good to go. Okay, so now I have none, and I'm just kind of looking to see. I can tell that this one needs a little bit more, and I'm pretty much out of juice. So I'm just going to top this off with just a smidgen of water. It's almost to that 1 inch, and I just want to make sure that the potatoes and everything are covered. Okay, so I just have a little bit of water here, and that should do it. Okay, now I have my really clean dish towel, and I am just going to wipe all of my rims. This is just ensuring that there's nothing on the top. If there's any food on your jars, that will also be something that does not get you a proper headspace. So just make sure that everything is nice and clean and clear, and you should be good to go. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and put my lids on. And my rings. You just want your rings on to fingertip tight. So that just means that you don't want them cranked down too hard, because that'll make your lids bow, but you don't want them too loose that they come off in the canner and you don't get it doesn't hold your lid. So just fingertip tight. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and put our jars in. Now this is super important. When you're pressure canning, you do not need your jars to be completely submerged. That's only applicable in water bath canning. So you just want your jars to have several inches of water at the side of it. So there's several inches of water in the canner so that it does not boil over, because these are going to be in the canner for about 1 hour and 30 minutes, I believe. And so that's a long time. So you just want to make sure that there's enough water in there that it's not going to boil out, because that's not good. But you don't want them to be completely submerged by no means. So they're about up the jar about that much right now in water. I'm going to go ahead and stick my lid on and then clamp it down. You want to make sure that when you're clamping your pressure canner down, if you're using an All-American, that it is equal around the whole edge. That way you get a proper pressure. And I am going to leave my weighted gauge off of my canner right now. What you need to do is you want to wait till this has a full stream of steam coming out of it, and then you're going to start your timer for 10 minutes. And that's just venting the inside. You want to make sure all the air bubbles, anything else is out of the canner before you start building up any kind of pressure. So I'm going to wait until I see a full stream, start my timer for 10 minutes, and wait for my canner to vent. Okay, so my 10-minute timer has gone off, and you can see the full vent, or the full steam coming out, which means it has vented. Now you're going to put on your weighted gauge. For me, at my sea level, I'm going to put mine at 15 psi. You're going to go ahead, I'm just going to say that it's 10 psi, adjust for your elevation. You can find an elevation chart online, and it'll say what you need to do. So where I'm at in Missouri, I put it at 15 psi. And now I'm going to wait for my pressure to come up, which means that I will not start my timer for the full processing time until I hear my first jiggle on my weighted gauge. Now you can use a dial gauge or you can use a weighted gauge. For me, the weighted gauge is just more accurate. Weight never changes. I don't need to get my dial gauge checked at my local extension office every single year. I just go ahead and use the weighted gauge. The dial gauge is just nice to be able to watch, but I don't go off of that. I go off of the jiggling of my gauge. So for quart jars, you are going to process for 1 hour and 30 minutes. For pint jars, you're going to process for 1 hour and 15 minutes. You will not start that timer until you hear your first jiggle, which means that you are at the appropriate pressure for your canner. Okay, so my first jiggle has gone off, so I'm going to go ahead and start my timer for 90 minutes or 1 hour and 30 minutes since I am using quart jars. Now, as it was coming up to pressure, I heard a pop. I'm unsure, but my thought is a jar broke in there, and I guess we will find out when we pull out our jars when it's all done processing. But that's just the name of the game. When you are canning, things like that happen. So we will see what happens when the lid comes off. But as of right now, I'm hopeful that all 5 jars are intact. We are going to maintain this pressure with this jiggler for the full 90 minutes. And how I know that we're maintaining pressure is that I hear that jiggle 1 to 4 times every single minute. So at this point, you cannot walk away from your canner. You actually need to stay close by, within earshot, or somebody within earshot, so that they can listen for this jiggle and make sure that you're maintaining pressure. If you're not hearing that jiggle and you need to adjust your stovetop up or down, you want to do it very, very slowly. You do not want to adjust pressure too quickly or rapidly drop it. So you just need to very, very, ever so slightly adjust if you need to, and then just try and maintain that 1 to 4 jiggles every single minute. Okay, so my timer has gone off, and all I'm going to do at this point is just turn my oven or my stovetop off. So you do not want to release pressure too quickly, or you will break jars. Hopefully that I don't already have a broken jar in there after hearing that pop. But you're going to go ahead and turn off your stovetop, and then you're just going to wait until the dial gauge goes all the way down to 0. So you don't want to do anything more at this point. You don't want to take your canner off of the burner or anything. You just want it to slowly release pressure at its own pace. Okay, so my dial gauge is all the way down to 0, and I'm going to go ahead and take my weighted gauge off. At this point, we're just releasing the remainder of the pressure, and you don't want to open your lid until all of that is done. So all of this is just steps to try and ensure that your jars get the proper seal. I can really smell that soup right now, so I am almost positive that a jar broke inside of my canner, which will be really disheartening, but I'm still hopeful that it didn't. So as soon as this is done venting completely out, then I will go ahead and open the lid and remove my jar. Okay, we're going to go ahead and open the canner. Moment of truth. So far so good. I don't see any broken jar. Now the kicker is going to be when I lift them up. Sometimes the jar will break along the rim of it, and that's where you'll, when you pick it up, all the food will come out. That's happened to me plenty of times. Now, these were brand new jars that I just bought this year, so I was going to be really upset if they were if they had broke so soon. But as far as I can see, nothing yet. I like to take the lid off and just give it a quick minute to adjust to temperature before I pull those jars out. You will be able to see that food bubbling and boiling, and they are just hot, hot. And so the slower you can do this, the easier it is for your jars to seal properly and your food to stay safe. So I'm just going to give it a minute, and then I'm going to go ahead and pull my jars out. All right, now we're going to go ahead and pull our jars out. And you're going to want to put these on a nice, clean dish towel, somewhere where they aren't going to be disturbed because they need to cool down completely before you do anything else with them. So I like to leave them 12 to 24 hours on the counter, undisturbed. So I am not going to touch these until tomorrow, and they're just going to cool completely. As they sit here, you may or may not hear the little pop of the lids as they seal down. So we will see you back here tomorrow, and I'll let you know what the next steps are. Okay, so it's been about 24 hours, a little less than 24 hours. My jars are completely sealed, and I'm just going to go ahead and go around the top and touch each top and make sure that it did seal. And they did. How you would know that they didn't seal would be they would pop back at you like a Snapple bottle. Like a Snapple bottle, they would just pop right back at you, and that's how you know that they did not seal. So I'm going to go ahead and take all of my rings off. Now I share this every single time I share a canning video, but I do not store my jars with their rings on. The purpose of the rings is to hold the lids into place while they're in the canner and then while they're sealing. After that, your jars should be properly sealed, and if they are properly sealed, the rings have no more purpose. And it's actually safer to store them without the rings on, because if for any reason, weather fluctuations, anything, your jars become unsealed, the rings will actually hold your lids on tightly, and you will not know that they came unsealed. And this has happened to me, and since I didn't have my rings on, I knew right away, because as soon as I went to pick up the jar, the lid moved because it had unsealed in our move with the temperature fluctuation and all of that. So it's very important to not store with your rings on. I'm just going to wipe each of these jars clean with a clean rag. If they're really grimy, you can put them under warm water. They are completely sealed, so you should have no problem doing that. And then once I've wiped all of my jars completely clean, I'm going to label them with the contents and the date. So I don't really necessarily worry about the month and the day as much as the year. So you can do however you feel is best for you. For us, I just really care more about what year I canned it in, so I can always move those years up to the front and the later stuff to the back. So the earlier years, the year that we are in would go more to the back. So I'm going to finish wiping these. And then we are going to label them. And so I will put on the top of my lid here, loaded baked potato soup. And the year 2022. These will go onto my shelf, and they will be ready to use as a convenience meal whenever I need it. They're good, they're healthy, they're delicious, and some of the stuff in it is straight right here from our own garden, the potatoes, which is so fun to be able to eat that all year long when you grew it so many months prior. So I hope you enjoy this. Go get yourself some loaded baked potato soup on your shelves for the winter months when it's nice and cold, and we will see you next time. Take care.